talked about, so I think it's the same thing. One of the things I was wondering if the group thought it would be worth doing is looking at kind of the root cause. Like, I understand we got surprised by multifamily housing, but there's a process in place right now where, like, if the planning board's going to approve something, at some point they get input from the sewer. And as these things come up, I don't know if there's something that would help us from not getting to where we are again. If we looked at, like, is there some change that we need to make in that process or in when proposals come forward? Should we look at something earlier than when the project's actually proposed? Is there a different way that the sewer commission and the planning board should communicate? But it just seems to me like, how did we get surprised with multifamily housing or the number of units that went up? And could there have been something that we could have done differently? And it's not to push blame, but it's to more look at if we're in a process, and is there some improvement that we should be making to the process as we get all these other new things in place?
And
So
Paul,
that was
maybe
my thought.
Yeah, maybe I could ask you, so right now, is the planning board allowed to base a decision based on the effect that the project has on sewer capacity?
No, because as we heard from council, you've got either sewer connection or on-site sewer. And the zoning bylaw, what we have, and I think Paul Haverty explained this the other night, is what we have is a moratorium. What we don't have is a zoning bylaw on growth or a growth moratorium on zoning. And so in essence, the planning board receives a plan. It's up to, it's up to the applicant in essence in terms of what is it you're proposing in terms of, you either have a sewer connection or you have a wastewater treatment facility.
Right, but what I'm asking now is forget about where we're at now.
Right.
In the past.
Yeah.
The process that was in place. So if
There's been, no, when a project goes before the planning board, even to date, there's no, report on sewer capacity from the project. That's not, nor water capacity.
is that allowed?
nor-
Could the planning board request sewer capacity and or water
I think they
capacity?
could notify, and we were sort of having these discussions amongst the staff today. There could be a notification from the planning board, but unless there's a zoning moratorium in a growth bylaw type of thing, the planning board cannot deny or postpone a application because of sewer capacity.
So
I
the
guess
sewer
Paul
becomes,
Harvey just say that.
Yeah, that's what I said. Paul Haverty said that the other night.
so the sewer part becomes a separate thing the applicant has to go
Yeah.
get approval for.
Right.
Is it because
Now,
we
what we
don't?
do, well, now, for example, and you've seen this, and when a project comes in, whether it's River Neck Road, UMass West Campus, what have you, we encourage and we offer to the applicant, and many times the applicant does it, we have an informal meeting of the various departments and inspectors. So if somebody comes in, they'll have a meeting in which around the table would be the, zoning enforcement officer / building commissioner, fire chief, police, DPW, community development director, myself, town engineer, and so forth. And those items get discussed and are made aware of, hey, the water district is another one, and those type of things. So that all gets done now informally. So the idea is it's part of the expedited permitting. So when they go before the planning board, they're given that preliminary review, and then once they go in, and again, we've exercised that even with the UMass West Campus thing, that they've come in, we've had discussions. Even today, Evan was contacted by the River Neck Road Mercury computer site in terms of, what are their steps forward in terms of the project. So yeah, it does take place, but when it goes to the formal level of submitting the application to the planning board, that all that sort of front work is done. So the idea is they go before the board, and that's why it only takes 2 or 3 hearings generally for a usual case. Sometimes you have a setback, like for example on the situation in the center right now with the Oddfellows building. They sort of got a step back because of the DEP issue with the floodwater. and then they called that joint meeting with the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board. But now that it comes back, it's expected that that'll be done in 2 or 3 meetings. So I guess what I'm saying is that work is done informally, communicated to the applicant, in terms of water, sewer, fire protection, all those type of issues, code, zoning, all that is done in an informal process before the board. And in some cases, you see, there is a formal thing where they'll come in for applicability. You'll see that, you've seen that with 9 Acton Road, you've seen it with the Oddfellows, and that's sort of that initial stage where they'll come in and have those discussions.
Okay,
But to answer
so-
the technical question, no, there's nothing that ties water or sewer capacity to the planning board's approval process.
Okay, so then maybe it's a less complicated question that I have
Yeah.
then. Is it internal to the process within the sewer department or the DPW? Would it be worth looking at, is there some modification that should be made? Or is there like a predictive database or something that we should be looking at so that whatever our new capacity is, we're able to foresee where it's going sooner than when it's expended?
That ideally,
Much like when we had the question about affordable housing, and Evan came and said, okay, well, I do a predictive analysis. Is there some step in the process that we should take where we're actually looking at that proactively?
I think that ideally is the master plan update. I mean, that's really where all this comes from in terms of, it flows from the zoning. Right now, the planning board's in the process of updating the master plan. And those are the macro issues that they're supposed to look at: sewer capacity, infrastructure, zoning development, and maybe, like you said, what comes from there should be a closer tie-in terms of how do we track the master plan to the reality that goes forward between updates. And so, what I envision being going forward is you would probably have an annual or semi-annual report, probably semi-annual report, where it comes in and says, okay, this is the development we have, this is our remaining capacity, this is what we have going forward. Whether it's water, sewer, electrical, those are the type of things, but that goes into what we call a master planning process for the community in terms of what are the issues that we're trying to
But
address.
the day-to-day execution of that is
Right.
within the department, so
Right.
they would be the ones responsible for doing that from a process standpoint.
Right, and
'Cause
tracking
once
that.
the master plan is updated, there's no more master plan
Right, but
committee.
the planning board owns that, and that's where I'm saying is that maybe the process, that has to go forward where there's a check-in. I mean, because if you may recall a decade ago when we had there was a master plan implementation committee. Were you on that, Pat? And that group, it was a group, and we met every quarter or so?
We usually met either right before or right after town meeting, so
Yeah.
about twice a year.
And then we looked at what were the issues of the master plan and how were they being implemented. And that one did have short-term, intermediate-term, and long-term goals and check-ins. So yes, what you're describing is an appropriate process. The question is, what is the vehicle? And I think the vehicle that I've seen in the past in this community was the Master Plan Implementation Committee, where they came back and said, okay, what were the goals of the master plan? And then what were the attainable action items in short, long, and medium terms? And then we gave reports, I think every 6 months or so. Dave McLaughlin, I think, chaired that. Pat was on it, and there were a handful of other people on that. So yeah, that does happen. And that's probably appropriate going forward. And again, it could go to a variety of issues. And that's why I say master plan, because it's not only water, sewer, it could be school capacity, it could be affordable housing, and that's really, like I said, it all flows from that document. And so I think that's, under the state law, the planning board owns the master plan. And so that becomes the vehicle, I think, for this master plan or these individual issues going forward in terms of planning and monitoring what needs to take place going forward.
Is any of this an issue that, I mean, we had a sewer commission, right, at one point when this was, and then we dissolved it, or?
No, right, but under the charter, the sewer commission was identified to dissolve upon the completion of the sewer project, and that happened. And if you go back to the sewer commission back in '97, they clearly identified back then that the town would have a sewer capacity issue, and that's why they went to town meeting with the home rule petition in 2002, which became the Act of 2003, which established the sewer capacity fund, and then became effective in April of 2004. And so it was clearly known that we were going to hit, the town could not do the build-out under that plan of 97 to service everyone. And that's why they implemented that fee going forward. What has happened is obviously the change in the nature of development in the last 2 to 3 years has accelerated the end line. Now, my preliminary analysis of the data for fiscal year 20, because everyone's asking, what's the 20 data? Because we saw the 19 data in that report. It went by fiscal year, it went to fiscal year 19. Well, fiscal year 20 that ended on June 30th of 20, which is basically 3 months ago, it looks like our sewer flow is down from 19. But the trend clearly is increasing sewer flow. And so I think that's where it goes. So the bottom line is it's not a function of the lack of a sewer commission. It's basically a function of we hit a need to act now, which probably would have been more, had the trends continued as they were the first 6 years of the 2010s decade, probably would have continued out to probably 2025, 2026 under that pace. Because
What
there-
else?
So with, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, several questions. In 1997, it was in 97 when we started to plan sewage
well, no,
connections?
there was a sewer, the sewer commission did a study in 97 and then brought it forth in 2002
And
to town meeting.
we chose to buy capacity?
No, they bought capacity long before that.
Okay.
And they even sold capacity before that. They sold it they offered it to Westford. Westford declined, and then they sold excess capacity to Tingsboro.
Okay. So in 1997, did they know what the limits were going to be on the sewer lines that they were putting in?
Yeah, what they had is they had a George is a sewer commissioner, so George, interrupt me at any point in time, but they basically had a map of the entire town, and they looked at every parcel in town and had a projected flow, and as I said, saw even in 97 that they weren't going to make it with the then permitted capacity from Lowell that was acquired in 2007. I think yeah. I'm sorry. Before that. Before that, yeah, 97. That expired. So basically, it was a series of 30-year agreements with the city of Lowell.
Okay.
That expired in 2007. That went back to 77, 30 years, and then the next one goes forward. So that's the answer is they saw back then, which is why they implemented the sewer capacity fee.
Okay, so in 1997, then one also figures that we had master plan committees in 2000 and then the one in 2010.
Yes.
Okay, so in 2010, 10 years after, we saw what was happening with the sewers, what was taken into account with population and with the actual capacity? Because at a certain point, you run out of, if you're counting it by bedrooms, you run out of like mother-in-law apartments or whatever it was that was planned. Like you run out of that space. So I'm wondering where the mechanism is to say to a developer, at this point, you need to have a water treatment plant. We municipally cannot handle the amount of wastewater you're going to produce. And I'm thinking about this specifically in terms of like manufacturing, like breweries. Folks really want a brewery. It takes about 10 to 14 gallons of water to make 1 gallon of beer. Big breweries have their own wastewater treatment. So I'm wondering if anyone has actually thought about the things we want for Chelmsford and where we're going to find that excess capacity.
I mean, I think that question may be best answered by the master plan committee, who's been meeting now for well over a year or so in terms of what they've done. I think that they could probably answer in terms of what I can tell you is if you go back to the last master plan around 2010 that Jim Lane directed, think about the time we did. We had just come out of the Great Recession, and there wasn't a lot of expansion or growth going on in Chelmsford or anywhere at that time. I mean, the number of homes you could count on a hand that were being built per year. And certainly we weren't into was not the era of what we've seen, as we said, in the last 3 to 5 years of multifamily homes, apartments, and so forth. It was, and I think I provided that data where it basically you just had static development for basically a period of almost a decade, if you go back to the recession to the middle of the teens of this year. And so when that master plan was developed, there was no discussions about sewer, water capacity, electrical capacity, or growth issues, because there just wasn't anything. And I think, and as I kind of indicated a few meetings back, it's an extraordinary dynamic change of what you've seen in the housing preference, in the community in terms of apartment and condos.
So, Paul.
So I think that's what I think that gives you the background in terms of, well,
I
why didn't
understand.
they see that? What was going on?
I'm uncomfortable walking away from this meeting saying it's the master plan, because there's nobody here that
Right.
owns that from the planning board.
Mm-hmm.
And something in my gut still says that there's something internal to our processes, and maybe it's a coupling between the two. So would it be acceptable to to agree that we'll look at a lessons learned analysis and identify any process improvement going forward, whether that be internal to the departments or a master plan implementation committee? Because something broke, and I don't know what.
There was a lack of
And
oversight.
like I said, there's nobody here from the planning board to engage in this conversation. So that could be something, that could be a first step, is to have some kind of cooperative discussion with them, if we really think that's the place.
Just to give you-
But the essence of it, I think it's important that we do some kind of lessons learned and figure out if there's a modification to our process moving forward, so we can minimize the probability that we wind up here again. That's all.
And, for me, as an example of where probably there was either miscommunication or misunderstanding, I attend a lot of these economic development meetings and project meetings, things like that. And I know when Lisa Maroney comes in and gives us her updates and her reports, and when we go into economic development committee meetings, we talk about Chelmsford going from silver to gold, gold to platinum standard in the there's this technological geographic regions around the state that the technological committee, I guess, looks at different towns and says, you're a silver, gold, or platinum area, so that when someone's coming and looking for a place to bring a business, they can look with the state and say, well, this is an area. And they look at, access to highly educated employees, access to the highway systems, public transportation, water, and sewer. And Lisa's always said, well, we are now gold, and so I'm thinking to myself as I attend these meetings, well, we don't have a problem with any of these issues, and it's always sewer and water are on that list. And now she's applying for platinum. And I'm thinking, well, if we're applying for platinum, they're obviously, we're good on all these issues. So in my mind, there was never a question to ask, how are we actually doing on water and sewer? Because why would we be applying for platinum status if we have water or sewer issues? Someone must be looking at that and saying, nope, we're good to go. So to me, there's got to be a disconnect somewhere, because if we're being told in one area, we're good, we're meeting and we're applying for higher and higher statuses, but yet now we find out we're not. So there had to be some sort of misconnect, and I don't want it to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, I think the nature of the town, and we've seen this in the discussions in the last several months, you've got an elected planning board, you've got an elected board of health, you've got a Department of Public Works. You've got, in essence, even though it's a small town, you've got different
Not a small town.
domains of responsibility. But you're right, the linkage isn't there.
Yeah, we got to have a quarterback.
Right, they're right. The linkage isn't there in terms of the communicating of the issues. Now, I think you're seeing that in terms of lessons learned. You're seeing the planning board, my understanding, and speaking to the community development director, they're now re-looking about the density provisions in the zoning bylaws for high-density projects. Should that be scaled back? And I think those are the type of issues that come up. And also the water district comes in with the same questions in terms of capacity. So I think the answer is yes, there should be some mechanism. I guess the question is what would that mechanism be? And that's what we should discuss. Is it, I mean, we've talked in the past about chair meetings or interboard meetings and so forth. Should there be that type of mechanism where the planning board chair, the board of health chair, the select board chair, conservation chair, school committee chair, and then DPW, town manager, community development director, sort of gather to look at these macro issues of the community in terms of where are we trending? You know, what should we be looking out for? What are the concerns going forward in terms of a planning process? So yeah, I think the answer is yes.
So
think-
we don't have to solve it tonight, but.
No,
we
but I
can
think
set
that-
the
We're only here to
objective
set
do
goals, not to
that.
solve
Right, but I think
goals.
that's the issue. There should be some type of a consortium or
Yeah.
gathering of the various parties.
Well, what exactly is Weston and Sampson gonna do in this study? What are we gonna ask them to do? Maybe that would answer a lot of questions there.
I mean, they're doing engineering work, basically. I mean, that they're doing the field work. They're
Yeah,
gonna,
but, I
they're
mean, are
gonna
they-
go out and, you know, to one extreme, determine, can you build something at Southwell?
Yeah.
To another extreme in terms of, well, what can we obtain potentially out of the Lowell plant for additional capacity? To, well, what, can we go to Barica for a portion? Can we do, do non-capacity issues such as infiltration, whether it's within Chelmsford or do we fund infiltration projects that affect the Lowell plant in Lowell? They're sort of doing the engineering work of addressing the sewer capacity issue. There's not a lot on the demand side that you're seeing taking place. You know, I mean, that's all supply side. How do you supply capacity? How do you supply capacity? So that's really what they're.
Are they gonna look into, say, a plant over in
Yeah,
in
yeah,
North
it's Southwell.
Chester?
Yeah, that's.
So they're gonna tell us how much acreage we need and,
what it would cost, and then if that threshold is passed, then it would come back to the board, the select board, and say, should we then proceed with hydrological and other testing out there? Because of that 150,000 proposal, about 88,000 is to do all those analysis. The remaining 60 would be to go to what I'd call a phase 2, saying, do we explore what should be done at Southwell, whether that's a viable site for a package treatment plant? And I can assure you, that when I read the thing, that was sort of the final phase, but I don't think that final phase gets executed until this board, as the select board of the community, says, yes, we want you to go there, because that's a big step, and it's a lot of money. And it's a major undertaking, and that's where it involves not only Chelmsford, but other towns, because that obviously may involve Tingsboro. If you're gonna
Right.
build at Southwell, then you have discussions with Tingsboro in terms of, are you gonna do that?
you could also
I
grab
think-
part of Westford there. You could eat Route 40 or
Right.
110. I mean, just a main line coming.
So I think that report, George, goes to the first part of the objective that Pat articulated.
The discharge, how long would a permit for discharge normally take, Paul? And are they still issue them?
That I don't know. That's the big question, is will they allow you to discharge into the river? As you know, there are a lot of groups that are concerned about the ecology of the
I know.
Merrimack River. So I think that's something that they've got to come back and tell us, because on any of these things.
Well,
we see-
before they even, expend all that money.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to go out there and start doing test borings and hydrological studies if the bottom line is there isn't a realistic time frame or even attainable to put a plant in.
I
on
would
the river.
imagine that they deal with the EPA or the DEP. I don't know, which one has the most jurisdiction or?
They both do.
Yeah, so, and the Corps of Engineers works with the EPA?
Yeah, the Army Corps of Engineers would be part of the federal level
So-
oversight.
So they would know probably right out of the gate if that would be a feasibility that we even pursue. I mean, maybe we either pursue it or we just throw it out.
Right.
I think, I don't know, because
From-
it's a kind of a natural because of the infrastructure's already, I'm not talking about for the whole town, but you could take, like, say, half of it, part of it, whatever flows in through
Southwell.
North Chelmsford now,
Southwell, yeah.
which is what, almost 50% of, 35% or
Good
something?
portion goes to
Of our
Southwell.
sewer. So, that would be a big hit, and we're
Dealing
paying,
with
what, $1.7 million, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Kenny, but we're paying, what, like $1.7 million already? Is
Yeah.
that just for that piece, right?
Right, for our treatment in Lowell, correctly.
From North Chelmsford
No,
or
for
for the
all,
whole
for the entire
town?
community, the entire town.
Entire town.
But that's part of the solution. I mean, I guess the goal setting tonight would be solve that problem, but I think there's two separate goals here, which is, we should address the sewer issue, but then it's a separate goal for what Virginia said, is to look back as far as why did we have the issue?
But I think my whole point is, I think Virginia's issues go beyond sewer. They should be all, sort of and that's where I was going to the master
Okay.
plan, looking at the macro issues of the town, because you don't want to be dealing with the same thing with either school space, water. You can think of a variety of issues that you don't want to be, caught saying, oh, how do we react to this crisis? In the short term. And so, that's what I'm saying, is I think those type of coordinated meetings should take place.
So that would be more under a development type goal rather than a specific sewer goal, correct? I mean, it sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it's a macro goal of
Those are two separate goals.
But I-
Sewer is
I
one,
don't-
and analysis process is another.
We're in a crisis with the sewer, so
Right,
I don't,
yeah.
if it goes under a macro goal, I'm okay with that, but I don't want to lose sight of really understanding what happened with the sewer, because I think that's going to inform the output of where do we improve.
Right, but those are two separate goals. The sewer issue is a sewer issue.
Solving it is a.
Process of how we
Yes,
got to the
I
problem of the sewer issue is a
agree.
separate issue.
Yes. And what Paul's saying is the process issue, the near-term thing that we're dealing with is the sewer, but with that, it's an infrastructure look, is what he's saying, I think.
And it may not be just infrastructure. It could be issues of diversity and other those type of issues in the community that at a macro level need to be coordinated amongst the various boards, whether it's school committee, selectmen, and select board, and so forth. So I'm saying is that I think that type
You
of.
make it too big, that we're never gonna.
No, but I'm saying is there ought to be a process where there's a check-in, perhaps every 6 months amongst the boards in terms of the macro issues. I mean, we have a town meeting every 6 months, perhaps maybe the alternate 3 months opposite that, you sort of have this check-in and saying, hey, where are we at? What should we be looking for? What are the issues, short, medium, and long-term, that we ought to be, planning for?
Paul, as we sit here and talk though, and you say, well, we have an elected planning board, we have an elected board of health, and we have the school committee, and I'm just gonna ask this, do you feel any of this falls back on you?
Sure, I think we all have responsibility for it, yes. I think we all do. My whole point of saying these elected things is we have elected boards, let's be honest, they tend to be guarded of their responsibilities. And we see that with the planning board with zoning. They sort of feel that they own the zoning. You see that with the Board of Health on the health regulations and septic and so forth. And I think you see that, so I'm saying is I just think that that's why you should get these people, have these type of meetings twice a year so you can get to those levels. But I think it's a shared responsibility on everyone. None of this happened in a vacuum.
So I have a question. If the planning board is at some level the owner of the master plan, and we have an elected board that tends to be realtors, developers, maybe an occasional lawyer, we never have a planner on there. In we had a planner, and the planner was ignored every time the planner brought up actual planning issues for which they had a degree. And
Oh, what's Mike Walsh? Is he-
I wonder about having somebody whose job it is to actually plan and not just say, well, where's the money? How much money can we make off of this?
But is that Evan's
Who's
job?
developing it, and would that be nice? So I am wondering, like where does having someone like Evan sit there, and is he aware of things like water and sewer, and does he ever have an opportunity to say to the planning board, this is great, this will make this much money according to your economic guy and your developer guy and your realtor guy, but how much, where's the sewer, where are the roads, where are the sidewalks, where's the transportation, where's all of the infrastructure that planners look at?
I don't think in some of you attend more planning board meetings than I do, but I don't think the planning board has those discussions in terms of revenue from a project or those type of
Well, I've
issues.
I
never-
think that's like an aspect of them.
That's
Yeah, but
not,
Emily,
that's-
when you think of that board, I'll defend them a little bit on this one, because you have Mike and Nancy are neither one of them they're more planners. I mean,
No, they're super into it. Yeah, no, they've
right?
got
You have
some real granularity.
Mike Walsh works
is
for a development
developer.
company, but he's an engineer, I think, his background.
But I'm wondering about that overarching person who is tied into what is
She's
going
not
on at the
talking
town
about
level.
the person.
Yeah,
Like,
but-
you still need
but-
somebody who's aware of what the actual capacity of the infrastructure is.
Isn't that Evan? Isn't he the community
But
development?
Evan's a
director?
community development director, but Evan works for works for the planning board.
Right.
But those type of inputs come from the other departments. They'll come from the Board of Health, they'll come from DPW, the town engineer. I mean, you see the town engineer sitting at the table at the planning board meetings. So Evan's job is not to be the de facto engineer. And you have the fire department weigh in on fire safety and so forth. So
So this is-
that all funnels up
That
to
would be
the,
another thing to just sanity check Emily's point as we look at how to meet the goal, because we can't solve that tonight. I
Right.
think we
Yeah, we're
we're
going into the
identifying the
discussion
goals,
of
so
the
let's
goals.
go
So
to
let's
the
just
next
keep
one
to the
if we're
goals and-
resolved.
We'll be here till
Yeah.
next Thursday.
yeah.
So I think, when I look at what's facing the town right now, and one of the things that I did do too is I pulled past goals because, normally in the past, we'd sit down and look at your goals and say, what was done last year, take it off the list, keep on what we need to keep on and keep moving. But there's a couple overriding pressing goals now, and as we said, the sewer. Secondly, addressing the issue of how this came to be. The third is the traffic situation / road issues in town. And I'm just listening because I think these are joint town manager and selectman goals. You know, I don't-
I also had the traffic as a
Yeah.
continuing thing that we should be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I like the safety committee, the traffic committee that's in place, and I think we should probably get more updates from them and work closer with them to find out, the process that's being made. But then, as a separate issue, the North Chelmsford traffic situation that we have up there with Ledge Road, and as you said, Virginia, not to make it inclusive of just Ledge Road, but all the traffic that's being affected up in North Chelmsford for
Well, it's
the
a
trucking
big
issue.
cut-through area besides that problem. It's a Dunstable Road, people get off at Route 3 at way up in Tingsboro, and then they come down Dunstable Road, they come, down Tingsboro Road.
Well, the
And
one
they
thing
get
that
off
I've
at the
been,
Rotary and they cut Route 4, it's impossible to get through from here to the center.
the problem that I have with cut-throughs, and sorry if I'm just cut, I've seen a lot of these videos. People are forwarding me videos of people getting upset at drivers standing in the road, flagging them down because they have New Hampshire plates saying, you're cutting through, you can't cut through here. It's a public road. Anybody
I
can
get
go
it,
down
I'm
any
just
road
saying,
as long as
but
they follow.
that's the problem.
Right,
that's all.
as long as you're following the legal speed limit and obeying the rules of the road, you can't sit there and say to
A
someone,
lot
you
of them
can't.
come off 195 and they go up through not Berkeley.
Brentwood and,
Brentwood, and those side roads up there, Westford Street,
right.
Pine Hill Road, they'll go do anything to cut through,
So I think traffic is one of the
The
ones
goal
that,
that you're identifying is to continue working on traffic improvements and also specifically the North Chelmsford
trucking issue.
truck issues.
Yeah.
What I was going to say, I get a little nervous when we segregate, and this is not to slight North Chelmsford, but when we segregate an area of town that has specific traffic needs, I mean, I'm sure that if we met with the Brick Hill Road neighborhood.
Agreed.
Or the
They
one-
would,
or
they,
the
yeah,
110.
that's what I'm saying, or the 110, I'm just saying, I'm
And
just
that's-
offering that as
And
a
that's
word
fine,
of.
maybe we just keep it at the traffic
because,
and truck
you know,
issues in town.
Traffic and safety issues.
Traffic and
Traffic and
safety issues,
safety,
because,
that's fine.
Yeah, even Hazen Road.
Hazen Road would be another one, yeah, there's.
My,
yeah,
my only point when I said North Chelmsford was I
It's
didn't
not just
want
Ledge
to call
Road.
it Ledge Road.
Right.
Because it's like water in your house,
Right.
it goes everywhere. So, all right.
And I don't know if you can break this out separately, but I mean, personally, only because I've been involved in that access road for so long, I think there is a window there that at some point will close, that we need to
But
have a
that-
focus
That's part
on.
of the traffic
Yeah.
and safety,
Right.
all right.
And I think if we can focus on it while the issues are hot and fresh, then we might have some sort of ability to, I don't know, I feel like the state either needs to use that land or lose it.
Right,
Like, there's gotta
It's
be a
that's
way.
That's a separate
I
discussion.
know,
so-
but things like that, like, sometimes you just have to focus on an area and alleviate one problem before tackling the next in depth, but.
So just going through the list from 2 years ago, I mean, Paul, we had on here, the Oddfellows House, the Fisk House, that's done. It's moving forward. We had the Merrimack, Williamsburg Riverbank, that's done. UMass Lowell campus, that's out of our hands at this point. We can monitor it and move forward. Civic Day, I didn't know if that was still anybody's I think we have more pressing issues than Civic Day right now.
I think we can't handle it right now with the pandemic.
Tax Classification Study Committee as far as the effects of splitting the rate, but again, I think that is not as important. You're right, with the pandemic and the meeting requirements and everything else going on right now, I don't mind, for me, I'm just saying, I don't mind putting that aside. We have the interchange analysis for the Route 3 corridor, and that's being done. We did the public safety. We're moving forward on the age-friendly community. That's underway. Plastic bags are gone, stormwater. That's 2 years ago, and then last
No,
year,
wait, go ahead.
you want to?
I'll save it, go ahead.
Okay. The Vinyl Square parking lot access, which we went round on that, but that's not,
That seems to be off the table
until
right now.
something out of our hands changes, that point is moot. The vision and values, this was last year's, we had the vision and value, but you're moving forward, we're going to get a presentation at,
Well, I think one of our goals needs to be to implement the recommendations of the Vision and Values
Right.
Committee.
which we're going to get that updated at fall town meeting, right?
It's going to be the same thing we already accepted, so I think tonight we ought to look at what those recommendations are and
Okay.
say what we're going to
we can
do
do.
in our goals
Okay.
this year to implement.
Good. So can we just put a pin in that? The fire station layout, we still talked about what to do there, and I think what came out of that study was you're proposing a rehab engine 2. Is there a next step to that?
Yeah, the big issue is going to be what's beyond engine 2? How many stations going forward, and where are they located?
So we'll need to know some update on that.
Well, I thought, yeah, we mentioned it at one of our meetings that we were gonna have 2 extra engines fairly soon because we're just finishing repairing a second one, so we really have 2 spares.
Engines, trucks, or
We have,
stations?
we have two
Engines,
spare,
I'm
we have
sorry.
2 spare fire apparatus, but the replacement schedule, as I mentioned last night, for fire apparatus basically calls for a new engine the next 2 fiscal years.
Even though we have
And that was part of the
spares.
discussion that we had about how are you planning for fire apparatus acquisition is somehow dependent upon how many stations you're gonna have.
Exactly. So we're going to need to know your sort of thoughts and,
Well, the consultant prepared the report.
right.
So I-
But we'll have to circle back around to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I had are we talking about this yet, or are we still going through your list? Because I had a related one to that.
You can jump
Or
in.
do you want me to put a pin in it?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so what I had made a note of with respect to the fire station was, we had MIAA come in and basically audit the station, right, and say this is what needs to be, this is what isn't up to code or doesn't pass inspection or whatever the right language is. Did they review just that station, or did they review the other ones?
No, they reviewed all the
All of them.
stations.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that goes along then with what is the next step between the outcome of their work coupled with the study that was done on
Exactly.
the number of stations?
So we're going to need some sort of a update on that and recommendations and sort of.
Yeah, I mean, basically you need a plan. What direction, what's the direction to go? I mean, the reason I brought forth north at this time, and I would have brought it back in the spring, but for the COVID thing, was under any scenario, the North Fire Station remained, and that report came back and said it made no sense to relocate it to Richardson Road because the response times didn't materially differ. So hence the plan now is to renovate and expand the North Fire Station. But the next step after that will be where? What is the plan? Is it 5, 4, or 3 stations? And
How
where are they
did the
located?
other stations fare in the MIA evaluation? Are they in as bad a shape as Engine 2?
Probably worse.
Some are worse. I mean, I think the
Engine
most,
5
yeah, I
is
think Engine
worse.
5 is probably
That-
yeah,
South
the South Chelmsford. South
Yeah, I mean,
Chelmsford.
that's, yeah, I mean,
It's,
you walk in there, it's bad.
But at some point, you've got to decide, and then it comes to the manning issue. So you can't ignore the manning issue versus the
Understand.
station and apparatus issue. And that becomes, and there's obviously money behind all of this.
And is this something you'll make recommendations to us about, or are you gonna throw it, I mean, is it all on us to do the report and who's touching the third rail here?
You know, if you like a recommendation, I'll provide it, but the bottom line is when it goes to the town meeting, you, as we've seen in the past, and we've worked on fire station and other things in the past, you ought to all be on the same hymn, singing the music to get a project like that through the community, because they're difficult. And we've seen that when you try to do difficult decisions,
You get derailed.
you get derailed because everybody's pulling in a different direction.
The problem with the locations is South Chelmsford, because that's still kind of like the furthest one away from
Well, no,
As far
the
as
problem is nobody wants a longer response time to their
response time. That's
neighborhood.
what I'm saying.
That's what it comes down to. And you're constrained by the history of 5 stations. And we've done all the studies. I mean, you know, you have the records and the fire chief can best elaborate, but
Well, am
the
I-
issue is gonna become, by definition, reducing a station creates a longer response time for someone, just by the fact that, you know, you reduce the station, and the question becomes, what's acceptable?
My other concern, I guess, in hearing this conversation is if the other 3 fire stations are in equally as bad or worse shape, you know, are we sitting on some serious liability and safety issues right now? Because it certainly seems that way at Engine 2.
Yeah. Yeah, the issues at Engine 2 exist at the other stations. The bunk rooms are in by the apparatus and so forth. I mean, that's clearly the case in Engine 5.
And you have the issue of no separation in the bunk rooms because they were designed for single gender occupants.
So there's different facets to what we have to go
They were
look
built for
at
call
with the-
departments,
with
that's the
plan
problem. They weren't built for people to occupy. They were built as call departments.
Mm-hmm.
That you come in a call department, you get out of your vehicle, you get in the fire truck, and you take off. That's how they were built.
Right.
Because they were all built in the 1950s and
It was in
early
the second
60s.
grade.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll have to, I mean, we'll have to address that,
Yeah.
but that's gotta be,
Yeah.
we gotta work through that this year.
I agree with
Um,
that.
We had a strengthen the leadership presence and support the town's economic development initiative on the crossroads at 129. I mean, that's, to me, a little bit impaired with COVID, but, you know, they've had some great news out there recently with, you know, the restaurants and so forth, and I still think that should be a goal. You know, I don't think we should let up on doing what we can out there. One of the items, one of the things that catches me, again, in attending all these meetings is, you know, when it comes to 129, I hear, well, it grows and recedes based on the ebb and flow of Boston. You know, whatever happens on 128 and in Boston decides what happens on 129. So if the economy's doing well in the state, then 129 is in demand. But when the economy's not doing well, then 129 is not in demand. But then when I go to some of these economic development meetings, I hear things like, well, we missed the boat and we could have done better, and that leaves me to believe that it's not necessarily all based on the ebb and flow of the economy, that we can have some control, and I think Lisa's proved that we can have some control on 129. So the fact that we have some wins there, I'd like to capitalize on that momentum and see what we can do to support them as much as possible. Because I think the time to get ahead is when you go into tough economic conditions. You know, if you can do something different to attract, and I think bringing in Press Cafe is something different, and as an anchor can, you know, we can use as a reason to move to 129. So what can be done on 129, you know, I think that should still remain a goal, and we should be there to support whatever needs to be done on 129 to help that recover. Thoughts?
I'm okay with that.
That's fine.
Right. Thoughts, Paul? Anything?
No, I mean, I think the macro issue is the bigger one, is how are we supporting businesses and what can we continue to be doing during this economic fallout from the coronavirus?
Right.
And I think, you know, so far I think there's been a lot done.
That might be a good
Yeah.
point to hit the pause button and just say, I think the people in Town Hall have done a great job to support. I mean, what I'm hearing, you know, when the governor came out and allowed outside seating, the building department, police, fire went out to every restaurant, and I mean, I've talked to a lot of restaurant owners, they were like, nope, I got everything in order
Yeah.
like that, I was ready for business. And then when we allowed, you know, drinks to go, same thing, this
Yeah.
got pushed right through, we adopted it, it was fantastic, you know, that because for a lot of these restaurants, they were sitting on $40,000-$50,000 of liquor inventory, even more, and that was like an anchor, I mean, around their neck. And the fact that, you know, when that came through and they could do the drinks to go, that just freed up that cash flow. And I know with the stay-at-home mentality, a lot of people aren't traveling. Some of these restaurant owners are saying, I mean, they're actually doing a little bit more business than they were over last August because so many people are home. You know, then we had the $1,000 grant that we got, and that went out to how many businesses each got $1,000?
It was 35,000, 35 businesses. I think
Yeah.
she's got about 29 at this point or so.
I mean, we didn't really publicize that a lot, but there was a $35,000 grant, and the business could send in to Lisa for $1,000 just to help them for COVID expenses, and we've paid out 29,000 of it, which is fantastic. I mean, Rosie's, I had breakfast there today, and she said, you know, it was a godsend that she got that. So I think the town hall has done a great job in supporting particularly the restaurants and some of the retail businesses in town, so.
And it's still ongoing. I mean, Christina Bruce has done a great job of being
Christina's
the
fantastic.
quarterback in that.
Yeah.
And we're meeting again tomorrow because they just came out with new regs today for outdoor dining with the heating in the winter and the extension of the time, and now you can have parties of 10 instead of parties of 6.
Right.
And so forth. And so, in fact, that'll be on your agenda next Monday night, so that way we can just keep moving with it.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the restaurants I thought never would have survived this are doing good, so, I mean, and so, again, I agree, the ongoing, but
Yeah.
But I think, too, that, you know, if we can support 129, because again, we all agree that that was sort of a key to the financial issues of the town, is if we could get that rebranded, reoccupied, it's going to generate more tax revenue than vacant, so. We had on here, develop and initiate execution of a communication enhancement plan for the town, which I think had to do with social media more.
Was that just the website redesign?
Website, yeah, we launched a new website.
Well, it was that, but it was also trying to just improve, do what else. So the website was the main thing that was identified for last year. But then I think you did some other things like, now there's blasts, if there's a public hearing announcement or whatever, legal notices, people can get those now off the homepage instead of finding them in the newspaper. So I guess the question would be, is there anything more that we want to do on that or not?
Well, I don't know that everything needs to be part of a goal, because that's going to be
Right.
part of day-to-day, you know,
Right.
improvements and,
I think there are,
Operations.
big goals and small goals.
Right, yeah. But I don't think we need to have
it
every
hurts to
small
remind
goal.
I'm just saying
I
it
mean,
was a goal.
I've got bigger things on here
Yeah,
that I'd
I-
rather chew off, but.
Yeah, I think there are a lot more pressing issues in the town. I'm just saying it was a goal. If you want to leave it, then. And then the last thing that was on here, we had a census one that's done. Review the town's current sources to include taxes, local receipts, revenue sources, fees, state aid, grants with consideration, or priorities of additional ways to grow the town's revenues. I don't know what, and that was the last item on the goals from last year, but I did give some thought to that last one as fine as financial goal, but we can go into that. I mean,
Do you want to address it now, or do you want to go?
sure. I mean, I just was thinking that, and I will say, Paul, over probably the last 3 years, you and I have had a few sort of discussions on the budget. You know, when I stood up at town meeting, asked people not to, I mean, I've always had small issues, I guess, with the budget, and I will say this year, if I could summarize what I always wanted to see in the budget was slowing the increase of taxes slowing the rate increase of the tax rates to the residents, coming down under the levy limit, not increasing payrolls, and you did it this year. You know, in last night's meeting, you went through it, there's no new hires, you're under the levy limit, and the rate of increase of the property taxes were low. So, you know, it's like the 3 benchmarks that I kind of use in the general figure you hit last night. And as I look at, you know, I was trying to formulate, and again, this is just me brainstorming today as I was getting ready for tonight's meeting. And I said, well, if we could review town services, and I think you do a good job with the trash and all that, but is there any way to save money, especially with budget cuts that I think it's going to get worse with COVID as we go forward. I don't think it's probably going to get better until they come up with a vaccine. You know, reduce any new hires to either a hiring freeze or so forth. I like coming in below the levy limit. That could become like a longer-term goal. slowing the rate of increase of the tax bills. To some extent, I'm curious as to your vision or what the board's vision is of what this town should look like in 5 years. Because I don't think we've ever really talked about, like, in 5 years down the road, where does this town want to be? What does it want to look like? What type of projects do we want to sort of encourage? And I know, to some extent, we don't get to pick and choose the projects that get brought to town, but I do know there is, and I've sat in these meetings where, you know, you can encourage projects that get brought forth. And I can give you an example of one that wasn't encouraged. We had somebody that wanted to talk to us about medical marijuana, and, you know, Chief Spinney said, not a huge fan, and we had that meeting. And but on the flip side, when someone like Hanover came to town, we got invited out to a meeting to meet with them, and, you know, that would probably send the message that we were encouraging that. But I think we should talk about what we want the town, where we want it to be in 5 years. You know, last night we went through the capital plans on the budget, and we looked at all these different facilities, you know, that have been 62 years old, 59, 59, 54, 51, all the way down to the center fire station at 5 years. Is there a plan as far as, and I'm sure you have one, but maybe to make it more public, as far as what is the plan, not just for next year, but for 5 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, to address the aging buildings in town? So so we're aware of what that plan is, and I guess maybe that comes up at the capital planning meetings that you do at the end of the year. So I guess I'm just looking for more financial forecast farther out, you know, 3 or 5 years down the road, and maybe 7 years down the road, of where we're going to be, and what the town's going to look like, as far as, you know, what developments we're going to encourage in town. Or in 10 years, are we going to be looking back at our downtown area and have 5-story buildings all over the place? Or are we going to be looking more to keep it no more than 3, or and no more large projects? Or are we going to be looking to encourage? So I guess I want a little bit more of that discussion from both the board, everybody sitting here, and from you.
I don't know that right now, given everything else that's going on in the world, this is a time to look down 5 years down the road, because
I think it's the best time.
I
You want to set
don't
some
know.
bars. No, you want to talk about what it could be. You know, I mean,
I don't know, Pat. I think if you look right now at a lot of the economist journals that are coming out, and I know Paul looks at them, because some of the terms you use, I'm like, oh, I just read that in the, you know, the Wall Street Journal, or I read it in the Financial Times, and so you're up to date on the stuff. And, you know, I just little clues when we have discussions. You can look out, and there are projections of where the world's going to be in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, where the United States growth is going to be down the road. And I would think that, and Paul, you're on top of this. I mean, you've said it. You know, there's a recession probably going to come up between now and 2000. You were saying that in 2019. Between now and 2021, we're probably going to have a recession. And I mean, we know, generally speaking, where we're probably going to be. So what's the plan? I mean, we've got a lot of really old buildings. So how do we tackle this, you know, down the road, 5 years out?
we need to focus on greener energy. Like, we have to figure out how to reinforce some of these buildings. You know, I noticed on like a microeconomic level, Tesla's got like a 27% off their battery for World Battery, I don't know, some celebration, probably like a Hallmark holiday, but for batteries. So, but like World Battery Day. So like, how do we do that now? Because I'm watching my gas bill go up. We're looking from, you know, 150 going up to like 320.
Talking natural gas or gasoline?
Natural gas.
Okay, all right.
Like
No, I
it's-
just wanted to be clear.
It's
Okay.
exploding.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, if I could redo my roof with Tesla tiles, I have a friend who just did that, and he is watching his energy meter go backwards. He is selling back to the grid, and I think that we need to be paying attention to things that we can do to get away from fossil fuels, to just get away and to create some sort of new industry. Like this is where we're going to go if we're going to survive, and I think that that's what we should be looking at. I think it's great to be looking at biotech. That's great. Absolutely spread that out around the country, but I also think we could be looking at other things and ways to get.
So I guess I heard two things in what you said. I heard what you ended with, which is, should we collectively be looking at where the future trends are going in our area, in the world economically, and how do we plan for that within Chelmsford? What is Chelmsford going to look like under that knowledge, right? The other thing I heard, I think, was more nearer term when you're talking about services and hires and the levy limit and slowing the rate of growth, which is, should we be having earlier conversations on like fiscal '21 budget strategy? I want to just make sure I'm hearing this
So
right.
we're already
I-
in
I-
21, it'd be
I'm
22.
fiscal
22.
'22. So,
Yeah, no,
And I do think they're intertwined to
well,
some degree.
I know, but I just want to make sure I'm under, because you went through a long list of stuff, so
No, I know.
are those kind of the two things you're talking about, or?
well, so, yeah, and to get an idea of roughly 2022, because, I mean, I'm someone who thinks, you know, look out 2 years, where could we be? What's the spectrum of situation we could be in? And that's why I think, you know, last October, I brought up, you know, what would it look like if we took the budget of our variable revenues and dropped it 10%, what would the town do, right? And then, lo and behold, March came and it happened, and I'm, you know.
But it wasn't 10%, Ken. The budget's $138 million. 10% is $13.8 million. We're talking $3 million.
No, but it was 10% of, property taxes aren't gonna change. Those aren't gonna fall off. You get your property taxes. It's 10% of the excise, meal tax, I mean, the variable tax rates, you know what I mean? Like,
You're roughly $38 million.
So are there scenarios that we should be looking at? Like there was granted, it was related to COVID, but one of the nearby towns had an article in the paper where they had like 2 or 3 different scenarios that they brought forward, saying depending which way the town wanted to go or which way state aid fell out, you know, here's some options. And I don't know if looking at a couple of different scenarios would address what you're saying in terms of like, what are the trade-offs with town services or hires or levy limit, or is part of like the near-term budget strategy or approach, if we had some earlier, maybe they're not totally quantified, but some earlier discussions on that before like the tri-board meeting, and then all of a sudden we have to freeze it in 2 weeks for town meeting. I don't want to speak for you, but that's I'm trying to understand where we want to go with the near term, and then with this longer term thought that you had about where will the town be in 5 years.
well, I mean, we can talk about where I want to go with it when we get into it, but I would like to know, in the next year to 18 months, worst case, best case, where we're going to be. And then 5 years down the road, what we want the town to look like, as far as, do we want it to be, the downtown area to be more retail? Do you want development? You know, what type of projects are going to be encouraged or discouraged, or?
So you guys are asking to plan and to make outlines for different possibilities of different futures? Oh, I love you.
With all due respect, you're not the planning board. The Board of Selectmen don't determine whether the downtown has a restaurant and a 6-story office building behind it or not. That's the planning board. And I've often said to people, you know, the local government, and this goes back to my earlier comment, local government in Chelmsford and most towns in Massachusetts is a Byzantine type of structure. We can't determine what the future of downtown is. And in fact, when something comes into downtown, such as the grist mill, that doesn't come before the Board of Selectmen. It goes before the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board.
So we're more of a conduit than we are.
Right, I mean, all you can do is you can express preference, or you could put bylaws forth, so forth, but again, the master plan goes to the planning board, and the planning board is the board. And I oftentimes I say this to people, oh, you want to be concerned about the development of the town of Chelmsford, you ought to try to serve on the planning board. The selectmen don't appoint the planning board, we don't,
Right.
you know, we're not the town planners.
So if you bring it back into the financial and the budgeting, what would make sense?
So I guess from a budgeting standpoint, I would like to know, worst case, best case, where you think we're gonna end up in the next 18 months, you know, if we don't get any meals tax pushed through, and, you know, that'd be worst case, right? If they don't unfreeze the meals tax and state aid disappears.
Well, let me make this clear on the meals tax. What they did on the meals tax is they deferred the payments until April of 2021. There's no way that I foresee that the state is going to take money that was collected by a local option meals tax and not give it back to the community. Okay? And I think what Dowling was trying to express last night is it's hard to get a handle on what that number is if they keep pushing the goal line out in terms of when they got to make those payments for those smaller businesses. And I think that's what she was trying to convey, and may have been not the clearest message last night.
So to that end.
Right,
what I'm
but to
wondering
that
is-
end- but-
So
but-
what I'm wondering is, if they push the goal line out another year,
Yeah.
and
It's a $600,000 revenue source out of a $138 million budget. So
That's an engine.
no, it's not an engine, because of the 600,000, maybe half of it is smaller businesses that got the exemption. The larger businesses probably didn't get the exemption. We don't know. We haven't. They only distribute those revenues quarterly. We won't see until two weeks from now the first quarter distribution of what that is. So then we'll have some sense of perhaps of what portion of Chelmsford is tied to larger versus smaller employers in terms of meals tax.
so do you not, in your mind,
Yep.
as you run the town, do you look at it and say, well, I'm
I
just-
manage the town. I don't run the town.
well, you
Who
run the
does
town
run
hall.
the town?
No, the town runs. Different people have
All right.
responsibility of the town.
Oh,
So
ours.
as you do that, do you look at it and say, well, I'm just going to take this as a year by year, 18 month by 18 month, let me see what's coming in on forecast, what's going out? Or do you in your mind have an idea what we're going to look like in 3 years?
I don't think anybody has an idea. The state legislature doesn't have a budget because they don't know what we're going to look like over the next 9 months, never
So your
mind the
approach
next
is
3
just
years.
deal with it as it gets.
It's not my approach. It's my reality.
That's fine.
Everyone would like to do 5 and 10-year planning, and we do it very effectively for capital in school facilities. But
Oh, I'm just trying to
but-
understand how it works, that's all.
But I'm just saying, yeah, basically how it works is we are dependent in terms of the margins. Because, and I'll do this again. We run a $138 million budget. Much like the federal and state budget, of that $137 million, there's only a portion of it that's discretionary.
So can I cut you guys off because you're going around in circles?
No, but I'm trying to, go ahead.
I know, but it's the same thing over and over again. So my understanding of the select board is that a part of what we do is we ask questions and we see where we can go. We try to determine the course of action, you know, and get things moving. So we can say, what is this? And we get to ask what the plans are. What are the plans? What is the best case scenario? What is the worst case scenario? I'm not asking for a ream of paper in detail, but I think what we're all looking at is, what are the possibilities? What is next? We're asking essential questions that help determine how we react to things, as opposed to sitting back and waiting for the benevolent state legislature to, you know, wave their magic wand and bestow funds upon us. Like what is our plan? What are we doing? What are the goals we have? Are they big? Are they small? If we can't tackle a big one, can we get rid of some of the small ones? Like what are the things that we need to do? Where do we see this going? Worst case scenario, we're all dead next year. Best case scenario, there's a vaccine in March, and maybe it's easy enough to produce that we get a fully vaccinated or mostly vaccinated population in a year. That would be amazing. But what does that look like? Where are we going? Which direction are we heading in? And so I think that these are perfectly reasonable questions, and I think that the lack of vision and the lack of willingness to look at possibilities and to set goals and to say, yes, this is what things happen. I think when you look at what economists say and what people who control things and have larger stakes in things do, is when things are bad, they look at where they can leverage whatever resources they have to get a little bit more, to gain a little bit of control, to see what they can manage, and there's that constant planning. There's that constant looking at the possibilities and seeing where the directions are to go. And I mean, if we can't ask these questions and we can't say these are the directions we want to go in, like what is even the point of having a goal session? We could just go back to rubber stamping Christmas tree stamps and liquor licenses. I mean, you know,
So you're looking for the conversation earlier? So there's an opportunity to
Yeah.
have a conversation?
so that there's an opportunity when something comes to say, gosh, we've thought about this and
even-
maybe we could go in this direction.
The reason why I'm looking for the conversation is I don't want to be reactionary in the approach when stuff like sewer capacity pops up or a fire station that's in dire need.
These are huge.
I mean, we have, I'm trying to count them, it looks like 24 buildings that you gave us a list last night that are, you know, I think the average life, I mean, we got the McKay Library at 120 years old, we got the town hall at 140 years old. Are any of those is there a project capital plan in place that says, okay, we do have some issues with these other things, and here's when we're gonna address them 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, or do we just,
No, we have a 5-year facilities plan and a 10-year school building plan.
Okay.
The fact that the town offices is over 100 years old doesn't mean it's going to the wrecking ball.
no, I agree.
It's
I
fine.
agree.
And so I don't necessarily agree that age determines the situation, but
No, we've
but-
done a great job
right,
keeping up town
but-
hall.
but-
I'm just,
I guess I'm hearing a dichotomy. On the other hand, you want to go below the levy limit and keep the tax rate low, but on the other hand, we want to invest all in its infrastructure. Those aren't compatible.
that's not what I just
They
said.
are.
No, but
You came
you
back to me-
asked Virginia. Virginia gave her thoughts on what you had said earlier. I'm giving you my thoughts on what I heard, what you said earlier. What I hear earlier is, geez, Paul, we're thrilled that the tax levies come in below levy limit and the tax increase is small. But on the other hand, I'm concerned that we need to invest in all these facilities and infrastructure, and what's the plan for doing so? Well, those are mutually exclusive. You can't do,
That's actually
of course
not.
they are.
No, they're
You can-
not.
you
Hold on,
cannot-
stop.
Let me
That's not what I
finish.
said.
Let me finish. We've heard from the schools that they want a new school facility, okay? And they've applied for the last 4 or 5 years. That's a significant infrastructure, and that's gonna blow the tax rate out of the water from any of these other things that we talk about. That's one project. And now we want to attack fire stations, and we want to talk fire apparatus, and we want to talk aging buildings, and so forth. Look, folks, you know, the approach I've had for 14 years is live within 2.5, but be responsible for our infrastructure. And as I said last night, I think that paid dividends when it came down to this COVID emergency and being able to operate, particularly in the schools, with the technology infrastructure and the air quality infrastructure and so forth that we've done. And again, and that's why I'm bringing forward at this time of a crisis, the investment in the Parker School cafeteria and the McCarthy Auditorium and the North Fire Station. And why I mentioned last night that we've got issues with some things that the school committee might not even stand behind, but when someone goes out there and I get the phone call in July saying we can't have a summer youth basketball program because the condition of the high school tennis courts and basketball courts is deplorable, my job is to ring the bell. And I rang the bell on the sewer thing a year ago, and you know that. And right now, we're not in a crisis. We are not in that crisis that the Board of Health suggested, where we'd have to not allow any connections and shut everything down. And so, you know, so I think, you know, we're ahead of the curve. Look at what's happening in other towns with decrepit buildings in terms of what's happening in what's going forward. And so what I'm saying is when you ask me an opinion on the economy, and I tell you that, hey, look, no one knows what's going to happen. And as I said last night, all bets are off if we go into another shutdown come November, December because of COVID, then basically all bets are off the table. That's a reality. It may not be pleasant, but that's an economic reality. And because of that reality, the state hasn't done its budget. That's the reality that we have, folks, in dealing with this. And so when you say to me, hey, can you give me a financial forecast that's going to go this way or that way? Sure, we can do anything on paper and a piece of paper. But the one thing I'll point out to you, and I've done this in the past, is we deal with employees and employee morale. And to sit there and issue a report that says these positions and these things are going to be cut, if it may not come to pass, is going to kill your employee morale. And I have a responsibility as a manager to maintain that morale. Because maybe what we should do, if the answer to your question is, maybe we should get a benchmark study and look at the staffing levels in Chelmsford compared to our comparable towns of our size and how many people we have in the various positions and offices. And that'll give you the measurement, are we overbloated and things could be done more efficiently? How many people do we have in our selectman's office versus the town of Tewksbury, or the town of Westford, or the town of Barica? How many people do we have working DPW? How many police officers do we have on the streets? How many firefighters? How many school teachers? That'll give us an indication, and that's what you want, if you want to measure efficiencies and productivity. And my final frustration in all of this is, the biggest spending thing, and I'll go back to this, the biggest department in this town is the school department. Okay? We don't have control over that. And I sit here and get hammered annually on questions like, why did you add this position when the schools add 8 and 10 and 12 positions per year? And it goes by the board. And to go to the final point about budgets, how much wiggle room you have in a budget, if we do nothing, what do you think we really have for discretionary spending in the budget? Take away the debt service. Take away, the basic things that you need to operate the buildings and departments. Like most state and federal governments, of that $138 million, you probably have a discretionary amount of $10 to $20 million that you can actually do something about. Because we got to pay Middlesex. We got to pay health insurance. We got to pay, we got to pay employees. We got to pay our debt service. And so if you sit here and you say to me, why do I hold these opinions? It's because I've done this job for 30 years, and I've done this job in this town for 14 years, and I kind of know what the realities are and what the pitfalls are. And having sat through the Great Recession and saw what happened when positions were cut and so forth, you don't want to take that lightly of coming in here and saying, well, if this situation happens, we're going to have to let these people go.
Paul, I think, it's.
So I think the bottom line is, in terms of a goal thing, I suggest that the town implement a benchmark survey. Find out how is Chelmsford staff, and also at the same time while you're doing it, why not look about how we compensate people compared to other towns? And maybe we can inform the community as to how the town of government is run. Because I'm convinced that at the end of the day, no matter what you have for a tax bill, nobody's happy when it goes up. If people would complain if their tax bill was $5,000, they're going to complain just as much if it was $8,000, and they probably would complain just as much if it was $3,400. Because the notion is the property tax is a tangible tax that's in front of you that you see quarterly, as opposed to your income tax or your sales tax, which is sort of more of a hidden tax that one doesn't see. So to go to your goal, what I suggest is put a goal of a benchmark analysis. Let's benchmark, and then let's be able to evaluate, given the number of road miles we have, given the number of population, how are we doing in terms of staffing of police, fire, DPW, town offices, and perhaps even include the schools in terms of students and number of faculty. That'll give you the analysis. All I can tell you is, in my sense, and I've said this repeatedly in the past, I'm impressed every day that we're able to do what we do with the resources that we have in this community. And I think perhaps maybe it's time to quantify that and do the benchmark analysis. I think the last one that was done in this town was probably before my time, so it's got to be 15, 18 years ago. And let's get data and document for folks what is it that we have as a community.
Paul, I think you went but past what I was asking for, because when I talk about the buildings, I'm not asking you to go and knock down buildings and put up new buildings. I just want to make sure that we don't get surprised on any building down the road. Like if you came back and said, we did not, like one of the items you said was, you've been doing it for 14 years in your senses and and I'm just asking you to share that knowledge with us. If you know the Chelmsford High School, or don't take that one because you picked the high school up, but if you said, yeah, we need to do some repairs at this fire station or that fire station, the Chelmsford Country Club's doing great, there's nothing we got to do there, that's fine by me. I just want an update on where we're at so that you can say to me, yep, we looked at that building and it's good to go for the next 10 years. I'm not looking to knock down buildings and come up with a replacement plan. I just want to make sure that we're safe and that we're not going to get surprised with the building that has a roof cave in or.
But all I'm saying is, Ken, we haven't had those things, and I think we have an effective capital plan that's demonstrated that preparedness. You know,
So maybe,
so I think we can give you
I
that.
can't
We
go,
have
I
that
mean,
plan.
I can't go to every meeting that the town has, so maybe you come and say, well, here is the 10-year capital plan.
It's a 5-year.
It's a
plan,
5-year
is
plan.
what's the policy
And we distribute
requires.
that, and it's printed every year in the book for town meeting. We have John Souza come in and go over that plan. But the focus is always on the immediate year.
The focus is always on the
On the
current
immediate
fiscal year,
right.
so maybe if we spend a little more time on what's in the longer term
And-
queue, and even year to year, things get pushed out,
Yeah, because why? Why do they get pushed out? We don't have enough money.
yeah, so,
And even on the budget side, I'm not asking you to go into the full detail of, oh, if we drop 20 million off the budget, I'm gonna go through this department and Candace, and all the way down. What I'm wondering is, how bad could the budget get if, like, what items in the budget for revenue could dry up, get withheld, go away, and I guess I'm just wondering, like,
How long can we function?
That's why you have a stabilization fund,
Yep,
to get you through the hiccups.
yep.
And right now, we're drawing upon that. But I don't know and again, of the town's employees, more than half to 2/3 of them are in the school department. I guess we can make the request of the school committee to give that report. I can't produce that report.
right?
They have autonomy. It's very clear, they have budget autonomy.
That's part, so some of that is also part of, so the multi-year plan you're asking for is also part of the reaccreditation process that schools go through. And it's a very in-depth self-study that I think would apply well in many other situations because everything is looked at and examined down to a very fine level. And a lot of places do not do that, like ever. There is no self-reflection. And so I think what I'm asking for is not how many people can you cut and who are they, but I'm asking what are the possibilities? Like, let's say level, good. Like, I want to see what the outlines are. I want to know, I want some sense of plans. I want, and some of this has to do, Paul, with some kind of hope and looking forward and seeing what the vision is, because what do we want to do in 5 years? Do we want to still be sitting here going, well, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing?
So what would be in that plan, Emily? What is it that you'd want to see in this document that would tell you what we were doing? Can you be more specific?
I would love a list of the things that need to be done. I would love a list of, big goals. I want to see what I want to see what the possible courses of action are.
For what? Possible action, courses of action for what?
Where we can put money into infrastructure, where the choices are, like what are the tiers of choices we have in infrastructure? Like I want it to look, so when you talk about reducing a budget and planning without knowing that it might come back to us, you can plan where to put that money. You can economize briefly to focus on something and build that up and then go. I want to know where you think we could possibly invest if we can find the money, and I want to know where we can leverage any resources we can to get ahead of some of the curves that are coming. I want to be more efficient. I want to get off fossil fuels. I want to see what the plans are for needing to be outside and socially distanced and away from each other for another year or year and a half while we wait for, proper clinical trials to go through 18 vaccines. Like I said, worst case scenario, we're all dead next year. So best case scenario, we're not all dead, there's a recovery. What are we doing with the money? Like, what are our plans? What do we want to do? Where are we going? And I want those outlines. And when I ask,
I don't know how we can go that deep into it.
but not even like that. But like, what are the bigger? like the small, medium, and big rocks. What can you move when you have like a little bit of money to get rid of something or to move something or
But
to do a
that
project?
conflicts, Emily, with if we have a little bit of money, we're gonna lower the property tax levy.
No, we're not. No,
That's what-
because you
that's what-
have to improve, because no,
Well, talk to the gentleman to your right.
no, we're not, and we're not giving everyone a free pizza in redos or whatever these nonsense ideas are, because there are things that we have to get done. Like giving everybody $20 is not useful. Useful is putting it into the pot and seeing what we can do with that money. What are the projects that we can spend with some of this? So we're functioning at a slightly lower budget. Are we economizing anything that we can put towards something to get a project off the table, to get some kind of small, medium, moderate goal taken care of so that we can see a little bit of progress?
Well,
Because I see a giant list of projects. I see a giant list
Well,
of improvements to be made.
So what I can do is, I mean.
I'd
if
like
you're-
those to be articulated, because I'm
Yeah.
curious as to what they are.
I think I'll go rewatch this meeting on video afterwards and then put some pen to ink and see if I can come up with a.
Because I'd almost offer, Emily, maybe our responsibility to the next generation is not to leave them with the unfunded liabilities that we're handing them today.
Oh, you mean
So if you-
that got handed to me by the
Yes,
previous
right,
generations?
by the OPEB,
Yes.
by the unfunded pension obligation, the unfunded OPEB obligation.
Yes, I am absolutely
which
furious
combined
that
a
those
great-
same people don't want to pay taxes now because they're done with things.
my whole
Yeah, no,
point.
I know, they used up the infrastructure, yeah, don't get me started.
But my whole
So-
point is those liabilities are greater than our operating
Because
budget.
trickle-down economics doesn't work. So what I want to know is, when we can find a little bit of economization, when we can see one of these projects that was not done in the 80s or the 70s or the 90s or during the dot-com bubble, I want to know what we can chip away at. I want a list of the projects that can be done.
Brett?
And,
I mean, I
and
think what Paul's saying though is.
Well, adding to the project, why don't you just pay down the unfunded liability that you leave in the next
what he's doing.
generation, and let them take care of it? Because otherwise, you're gonna saddle them. You're gonna,
so-
just, what do you think the federal government's doing? We're incurring debt. Somebody's gonna pay for it at some point in time, but it's like, we'll leave that for another time.
I know what they're doing.
Oh,
I
that's what
also
I'm
know
saying.
where the money is being wasted, and I know where all the waste came from.
And
I think
then-
we all do.
So for the
But the
purposes
point-
of a
yeah.
goal discussion, are we okay with Ken taking a pass at putting pen to paper at something?
Or,
considering the dis-
Paul, should we
and then we
just
can
build nothing
revisit-
and just pay for all the retirements
'Cause
that
I
nobody
think some
funded
of us-
while they were
we have
actually
other
working
ones
and
we're gonna
contributing to
discuss.
society?
Yeah.
Can we
Maybe
move
what I
this
can do is,
along?
maybe I can set up a
This
time
is
with you
late.
and sit down with you and come up with something that we can
That's a good
agree on as a financial goal and.
I think it's gotta be all of us agree.
But
Well,
we
yeah,
can bring
but
it back.
Right,
Yeah.
just
No, come back.
take a pass at articulating based on this discussion and come
And
back with it.
even if the outcome is that the goal is status quo, but just more transparent, because I have a feeling a lot of what you know is in your head. And I think
But it's not in my head, it's in the plans. There's
that's
a
fine,
book
but I-
that
but I-
shows the
I-
5-year capital plan. There's a
Right.
10-year school capital plan. The school department paid $200,000 for a school facilities plan. Those plans exist.
I think what I'm looking for is the stewardship, sustainability, innovation, adaptability, and creativity. That's what I'm looking for,
Okay.
but I don't know that we actually have those values.
All right,
So-
So I'd like to just leave it that you'll go offline and work something, so,
Okay.
because I know Pat has a list, I still have some things I
Yeah,
want to talk
the
about.
one on my list that's gone, that we've done yet so far, yes.
all right,
Say
I'm
again?
done, so.
Yeah, we've only gotten one off my list.
Okay,
You want me to go to the next one?
Sure.
So
Sure.
the next one is the Warren Pool Farm. I attended one of the meetings on Saturday with the interested parties, and quite frankly, I think that's going to be a little harder to make everybody happy than what we maybe originally thought. So I'll be interested in your thoughts on how that goes forward, what our options are there, including the conservation restriction that we'll have to put on it. I know sometimes that runs into some issues too. What could happen with it, how it's going to be sustained, if it's going to be able to generate any revenue, or at least, sustain itself. So, that's just a couple of the thoughts.
so what's the goal around it?
What to do next with the Warren Pole Farm, I guess, is the,
And there's a
Sure.
committee for that.
Well,
No,
there's
they
no-
go out of existence in
Next
next week.
Right, they're just making an initial recommendation, right?
right?
Right.
So, I mean, I think there's gonna be some work to get that moved.
What would you suggest, Pat?
I don't know, I mean,
So you're looking for like some type of plan and recommendation for Warren Pole Farm?
yes, right. Yeah.
Next.
Beautiful piece of land.
My next one is one that's bugged me for a couple of years, and it's not directly you, but it's on the website, the committees, boards and committees. That hasn't been updated or accurate, and I think if other people here have mentioned that too, that, you know, it's burdensome to try to figure out who's on a committee, when their terms are up, and information on how to get in touch with some of them. Like I said, I don't know if that's directly yours, but they've
No,
tried a
no.
couple of options and
That,
nothing seems
that
to have
old
worked.
link is still active. That was my problem.
Yeah.
I had it bookmarked, and that's what I keep going to, and it's way out of date, and it's not supposed to be active anymore.
Right.
I wasn't going through the website where you wind up with a Word document that has everybody's contact information in
Exactly.
it.
And the reason for that is that we cannot find a software provider to generate what should be a simple list. It's not been for lack of trying. You said we've been going on 2 years
Yeah.
But we
trying
should
to.
at least disconnect the old link if there's a
Okay,
way to do
and I
that.
thought we had, because you say go through the website.
No, I can still go to it through my bookmarks.
But you're not going through the website, right? You're
Right.
going through a bookmark, okay. All right, I'll just have them disconnect the
I
bookmark.
mean, you know, surely other communities must have something that they feel works. I mean, I haven't, maybe I should look at other communities and make a suggestion on who we could steal from or whatever, but,
Well, like I said, there are certainly vendors out there who provide software to municipalities on this. We've looked high and low. We'll continue to do it, but it's not for a lack of want. It's just, we haven't been able to identify a vendor who can provide something that indicates when your term expires. Yeah, you know, it sounds ridiculous and frustrating, and we're as frustrated as you are, which is why we put this paper list up on the website so that people could actually see what the contact information are and who's on the
Right.
committee.
yeah.
But anyway, no, it's
And my last one is more of a quality of life and, you know, it's a type of issue. Some kind of plan. We don't know how long we're gonna be under the situation that we're under. I know people miss a lot of the events that we have, like, you know, like, we're probably gonna miss Winterfest this year. We're gonna miss the Holiday Prelude this year. We missed the 4th of July. We missed Memorial Day. We don't know yet about Veterans Day.
Happen.
If there's gonna be some way that we can, you know, do something to regenerate those on a limited basis, and I don't know what that's gonna be. Like I said, I mean, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, but, you know, I think that has to do, like you're talking about, you know, the morale within town hall. Well, you know, same thing with morale with the whole town when we can't do some of these things that people are used to doing to socialize. But anyway, I don't know if it's even reasonable to do anything like that, but something I've been thinking about. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on.
Can you give an example, like, so like for Veterans Day, we had the video. Is that what you're like?
Well, I mean, I don't know how we would.
I'm just trying to understand what you're trying to address. So the community events have all been shut down, basically.
Correct.
So
Yeah, if there's some, you know, if we're still under the same restrictions next year, or even if they're lifted a little bit, how do we, you know, do something like
Build
that
this
on a limited
sense
basis?
of
How do we have a parade on a?
Well, like
limited
last year, they had the
basis?
holiday stroll. So is there a way this year you could do a mask-required holiday stroll where you have police officers around the center to stop traffic so people could walk around the center, go to different restaurants, go to the different stores with masks on, stay 6 feet apart, no more than 6 people at a table in a restaurant, but just make it a day, so if you're out if you're out doing the holiday stroll, you can see people you haven't seen, wear a mask, say hi to them, spend some time together, and just get into the festivities of the season, but COVID compliant.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe that is part of the issue, is you know, instead of a 4th of July, which is just the country fair on the 3rd and then the parade on the 4th, maybe it's a week-long celebration, and so that things can be more socially distanced. I don't know. I mean, I have, you know, I
But I
don't
think-
know, but I just know
You
that.
said that, Pat, thinking of the holiday stroll last year, the stores were open. you know, as long as they're following the COVID compliant rules of you gotta have a face mask when you go in, stay 6 feet apart in lines, things like that, you still could have a holiday stroll. You had a few more police around the center to stop traffic and direct traffic and keep, you know, and keep some sort of sanity, because what I find is if someone has a complaint about somebody not wearing a mask, who's gonna enforce it and who's around to, I don't know if that's doable, but just, I hear what you're saying, I'm just trying to think logistically how you go about having something like.
Right, and I don't know either, yeah, I mean, this all came upon us so quickly, and everybody, I think, adapted pretty well. But I know that, you know, we don't want to go too long without having people be able to interact with each other at some level, in some way. So,
I mean, I don't know if you could do like a holiday prelude tree lighting where it's fenced off, and to get in, you gotta have a mask on, you have to keep the mask on.
but then you'd have to
Well, what do
limit.
you do there? You can't do Santa, can't take pictures with Santa.
Yeah.
You can't
Can't give
get
out
on a
hot
hay
chocolate.
ride, you can't get on a
You could
tractor
do a
ride.
picture with Santa, you just have to stand 6 feet in front of him. No, in all seriousness, you could.
Photoshop.
Yeah,
I mean, that,
Photoshop.
because
Yeah.
it then becomes the year that you almost didn't have a Santa, right? You know what I mean, like,
We're kind of looking at that with Halloween, though, which is much closer.
Right.
And speaking of, I'm getting questions
yeah, we're all
about
getting
that.
tons of questions about
What-
what.
yeah, what are we gonna do about that?
There was a call with the MMA and the lieutenant governor today, and she still had no guidance, and she was vague as to whether the Board of Health would put guidance. And in talking to Chief Spinney, you know, he wants to do something that we don't have to then go back and rescind a week or two later. So we may, he's almost requesting that we push it off to your 1 week to your first meeting in October, as opposed to this coming Monday night, in the hopes that we can get some clarity, because really what's gonna happen is it's gonna be like the school cancellation issues.
Right.
He wants to talk to the neighboring chiefs in terms of what are they in their communities doing, so that you don't have a consequence of, oh, well, you know, it's a Saturday night Halloween, oh, well, they canceled Halloween in Lowell, so all these people are gonna come over into North Chelmsford. You know, that, you know, or Billerica into, you know,
West Virginia,
West
any
Virginia.
other
Yeah,
town that
exactly.
cancels it
Exactly.
comes into our
That's
town.
right, that's
because
the
you
whole
kept
issue.
it.
Exactly, and so I think what he wants to do is, in talking to the Board of Health and from the state, is what are the guidelines? Because all we've seen at this point is the major ones are canceled. You're not going to Salem this year, or you can go to Salem, but you're not gonna see anything in Salem in terms of the traditional Halloween focus. But they haven't gotten down to the micro level of, well, what does it do for individual communities in terms of, for trick-or-treating, in terms of social distancing and the idea of avoiding the spread. So again, I think there needs to be sort of a regional plan because of the concerns of
Okay.
a
Is
Saturday night
NIMCOG
event with other
talking
towns.
about
I
it?
had a couple more, you want me to?
Well,
Yeah,
so
sort of,
Pat, are
yeah.
you all set?
Yeah, that's all
Okay.
right with it, yeah.
So, I know that in general, we support the committees we appoint and things like that. I didn't know if there was anything specific we might want to call out, and I thought of this when you said age-friendly. We have this new Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. And so is there anything that we want to call out in terms of just like heightening our awareness to support that, or do we just let that process take care of itself? I
Yeah,
mean,
I
we're not
actually-
going to step in the middle of it, but
I actually had that on my list as kind of a select board goal, that we would monitor what they're doing, what they're talking about, see what actions we need to take to support them.
okay.
Yes.
All right, so you, okay.
As a board, should we do a review of our committees to make sure there's, because I find we're fighting like crazy to keep our committees full.
Well-
Should we do any consolidation of committees,
Hey,
or?
can we just go back to the REAC committee? I've had a couple of comments from people. So ordinarily, all of our addresses and phone numbers are public record. Because some of these people are not elected officials, and this is a very specific committee that is coming out of some very specific issues, some of the folks do not necessarily feel comfortable with their names and phone numbers and addresses made public, especially if they've had any kinds of issues in the past. So I was wondering if we could waive that
We're already
requirement.
public in the forms, but if they, I really don't
It
feel
just
strongly
requires
one way or
more
the
work
other
than
if
if
they
you
just
go
list the
right-
name.
Our applications are public.
Right, but, you know, where
I mean, we can issue them town email addresses and then just identify the person and provide an email address. But the problem is there's some portion of the population that doesn't use email. And that's why we've always provided a telephone number, but if you don't want to do that, let us know. I mean, we can do that, but,
So if a resident wants to talk to somebody on the committee and call them and give them ideas or try to, I mean, you gotta know who to reach out to.
Or maybe the committee could designate somebody as,
The
or
con-
a set of
contact
people who
person.
don't mind having their
Yeah.
phone numbers out there.
I just wanted to
I
put
think
that
they
out
need
for,
to
there
address
for the
that.
people who are rightfully nervous. You know, I mean, there are some people who've had some negative experiences who are concerned. So,
If they're scheduling their first meeting, my suggestion would be maybe they talk about it and
Yep.
Okay.
tell us
Yeah,
how
sure,
they want
that's
to
fine, yeah.
handle it.
okay,
Okay, so I had, I gave you guys page 4 and 5 of the briefing that we received in July from the Vision and Values Committee. And so I just had I wanted to do two things. I have a goal that I wrote that just says implement the recommendations of the Vision and Values Committee. So I know they're gonna report it to the town meeting, but then we talked about posting the statements on the website and in municipal buildings. And then I don't know if we want to go any further with it. So the committee had a general recommendation about when the town boards and committees are conducting their goal and strategic planning, they do it in alignment. And we're doing goal planning right now, so if you flip the page to page 4, my next question would be, is there anything from this that we haven't already addressed that we should incorporate into our goals for this year? Not necessarily in these words, but for example, you mentioned committees, Ken, and Pat, you mentioned community events. Well, what we're really getting at is trying to foster that civic and community engagement. Right, that falls onto one of those, and we've talked about stewardship and budget and fiscal responsibility, so some of this, I think, is going to flow over into our code of conduct discussion, but I just wanted to sanity check, is there anything else that we want to put forward besides to just implement the basic recommendations? And I think even the conversation we had about the macro issues and the infrastructure, I mean, that's kind of getting at some of the being responsive to the environment that we're in and trying to plan for it. So right now, I feel comfortable, but I just wanted to head check.
Yeah, I didn't think this was really a basic list. To me, this seemed pretty thorough, so maybe that's not.
So we're okay with implementing the recommendations?
yeah,
They're not that hard, but,
no, they're not.
Yeah, I thought we voted on that to do that.
okay. And then Ken brought up the age-friendly. Do you think there's anything specific in that area, Paul, or do we just let that come forward as it comes forward?
they're close to finalizing their report, and
Right.
so I imagine we'll see something, certainly before the end of the calendar year, and maybe even sooner, probably even, October, November timeframe in terms of.
That's not a
yeah.
committee appointed by this board, though, right?
No, I believe, I think I appointed them, but
Okay.
it's, clearly it's that macro issue about, livable for all ages in the community, and then they're gonna have action items that flow from that, some of which will go to town meeting, I would anticipate.
So we don't need to call out anything individually for that right now?
No, but I think similar to the diversity and inclusion committee, I think the whole point is we ought to look towards support and implement the age-friendly initiative, and
Okay.
some of those things have already started. I mean, the park at Worthing Street and North Road came from the age-friendly initiative.
Okay. That's all I had.
Do you have anything else on your list?
No, I just wanted ways to look ahead,
George, you good?
plans.
All right, so we'll,
So, I mean, as far as, I did have, one more, as far as us, the select board, is obviously, since we have a new name, to update our policies to reflect that new name. And I have a couple of, minor changes that, I'd like to bring forward on that, so maybe, say one of our November meetings,
we'll go
I'd be
through it.
willing to do that, to get that ready. And I'd like to put something in there, I'd like to kind of talk about town council communication.
I'm sorry, Pat, talk about what?
Town council, communicating
Oh,
with town
okay.
council. When we appointed town council, I remember that we said, if any of us wanted to talk to town council, we had to go through you. But it seems that some members of the community, some residents feel they have the authority to do that directly. And
What?
I think we need to have some.
Residents in the community go to
What?
town council?
We got an email this week from one.
Yeah.
She sent it right to Paul.
Well,
Hudson.
I've
Oh.
seen two
Yes,
in the past week.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I figured that they had some sort of permission, like,
Well, even if, I don't think they should, it should come through either the town manager or the chair.
can we bill
but-
for it then?
I'm sure we're gonna get billed for those.
It's $200 an hour, so
Correct.
if you
Well,
wanna use
But how do
town
you stop a
council-
resident from sending an email to the town?
But
Send 'em a bill.
You can't stop him, but in fairness to Paul Haverty, he called me first thing Monday morning and said, I got this email that you've been copied on over the weekend, how do we respond to it? So I want to assure you that Paul just doesn't go off and spend, legal hours just,
Well,
without,
Yeah,
without,
I mean, if you can make it a policy, but I don't know how you require residents to comply to that. I mean,
Send a bill with their taxes.
well, I mean, that's good to know, that
Yeah.
before Paul does anything
Yeah.
on it, that
And-
he
and-
does. But even so, I think it should, they shouldn't have, it shouldn't go that way. I mean,
No.
you should have known, or you should have known that it was going before it
I
went.
agree, but what do you
No.
do?
I don't know, maybe we just publicize it, or some, I don't know. I mean, how do they know how to get a hold of town council?
I mean,
Go to his
it's-
website?
I mean, honestly, it's not hard to find.
Well, but that doesn't make it right that,
And I
No.
think in that case, there's been communique between the two of them over planning board issues. That's probably how he has his email address.
okay.
yeah, there was.
Well,
a- there
yeah, I
a-
was thinking
there
of
was
the
a
other
ma-
one.
Yeah, there was a matter that came up a couple years back, which you
Yeah.
can probably correct upon.
So, anyway, it's just something that,
Because we don't put town council's email out there.
No.
So,
There was a Warren poll question that went directly to him,
Right.
too.
right.
Yes.
But I think if a resident, I don't know how the resident get their, maybe they call his office, say, can I have his
It's not
email
hard.
address, and they give it out. I mean, that's easy.
It's on his office's website.
It is,
Yeah,
it's easy to
it's on the
find.
office website probably too.
Right, yeah, but I'm
I-
just, it's just,
And the firm does work in the area. I've encountered
Yeah.
members of their firm doing other things, like,
But as long as Paul's Haverty is calling
Yeah. And I
town
think-
manager and saying, I got this, what do you want me to do? I mean, you can't, I'm comfortable with that. You
Yeah.
really can't stop a resident from, I agree with you, it shouldn't be done, but how do you?
Right.
You can't, you want to put out an edict and forbode it?
Well, I mean, I guess if I'm the resident, then, I mean, yeah, I don't know how we inform them that that's not the protocol to use. They need to follow the protocol that we have in place. So if they never get a response, are they going to say, oh, this town council is no good because they don't ever respond to my emails? It's kind of a double-edged sword that way. But anyway, it's just something that came up, twice in the past week, and I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, it doesn't sit well.
Right.
I'm not sure what to do about it.
Okay.
All right, so we'll all sort of depart, write these up and come back? Is that the process we want to do?
Are you taking the pass at writing them up?
You want me to take a pass at writing all of them up?
Well, I'm asking what the process is.
I mean, I'll
Do
take a
you
pass
want
at
us
the
to
financial
Do
one.
you want us to send you written inputs on what we brought up?
Yeah, I mean, if you
okay.
want everybody's, if you have something on your list that there's a concern and we discuss it tonight, why don't you write it, what the goal should be, send it to me, I'll write mine up and we'll bring them together in one list and go through them again.
Okay.
And same with you, Paul, you want to forward us what you feel, you think the goals were that for you and what you think the goals were for us? I want us to all be on the same
You're
page.
basically
I don't-
going to synthesize everybody's
Yeah, I think,
inputs.
I mean,
Okay.
I don't want to be defining the Board of Selectmen's goals. That's, I think the mine sort of flow from yours.
Okay.
So I'll be looking to see, what you come back with.
So do you want to move on to code of conduct? Say yes.
I'm all set.
So I did notice that in our policies right now, we have a section called Code of Responsibility. It's just one paragraph. It's at the end of the responsibilities for the board, the select board. And it says that we shall have, some indication of a way that we accept the responsibility of the town manager, and the town manager accepts the responsibility of the select board and authority. And I think this fits very well with that. I mean, we almost could replace that one paragraph in our policies with the respective codes of conduct. I mean, maybe there needs to be some tweaking on the codes of conduct, but that would just kind of be my suggestion on where it would fall as far as, somebody being able to find it.
So, I guess what I'm struggling with is, we have the paragraph in our policy book. There's personnel standards of conduct in section 8. And some of this, I think, is reiterating what's already documented in the charter or in the policy book. And I get concerned about doing that because now you've got another document to keep updated and synced. And I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile considering just simplifying a little bit. And if we want to reference the charter or the select board policy document, just put that in that, we recognize our roles are in accordance with the town charter and the Board of Selectmen policy, or the select board policy document, because otherwise we're creating a third document or a fourth document to keep updated. And some of what I thought, the codes of conduct, I mean, it could be a page, and then there's other places where it's like it could be a 20-page thing. So I think we have to come to agreement on what we're looking for with the code of conduct. I think there's a lot of detail in this, and I don't know if that's what we want, or is it something that's at a higher level that's like 5 to 10 bullets that says this is how we conduct ourselves with each other.
Well, I think that's a big part. I think this is more behavioral than actual
Right.
responsibility and authority. I agree with that,
Right,
yeah.
so all these statements about responsibility and recognizing, I just don't think this is the place for it. I think you can say that in one sentence and reference back to the other documents that delineate responsibilities and keep the code of conduct to the behavioral things that we want to encourage. And the other question I had was, if you do that, then do we even need 2 codes of conduct, or is it a code of conduct for this body, which includes the select board plus Paul? This is how we're going to meet and conduct ourselves with each other. And I know some of this I'm thinking out loud, but this was the first time I really kind of read through some of this. And I question whether we should simplify it.
I mean,
Because I'll never remember all this.
well, I don't think anybody's going to quiz you on it. What's number 3C, yeah.
Somebody out there knows what 3C is.
Pat does.
I do.
And I honestly, Pat, I mean, I didn't have a lot of time to work with it.
Yeah.
But that was my initial thought when I read it, was I feel like I'm reading
Yeah, and it is,
existing documents, and then is there a way to maybe just simplify it?
well, I mean, I just took this from another town.
I understand.
So, I mean, if you want to take a run at simplifying it,
I'd like to know what other people think before.
I mean, I read them through and thought there was a lot there. And I didn't even think of going to one. I thought of shortening both, but maybe going to one does make sense.
yeah, I mean, they are,
They're very similar.
They're-
Supposed to be one team.
reciprocal, yeah.
Yeah. We're supposed to be one team, right? And
right.
Maybe we should review it and go back to another meeting of put on one of the agendas and just, like you said, simplify it, shorten it up, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think at the very least it would be difficult to combine it into one.
Right, I think there's a lot of good material
Yeah.
here, so, to work with, so.
could you do the same with internet and social media?
And then I just, again, I wanted to sort of sanity check, is there anything from the values, which is really what drives kind of behavior, that we would want to pull into this or not? And I don't know the answer to that, because like I said, I didn't have a lot of time to work with it, but if you want, we could take do you want us to provide you inputs?
Okay, that would be fine, yeah.
You want to do it that way?
Okay,
I can do that.
okay. All right, yeah, and I can work with Paul too on taking the town manager part.
Paul,
and-
you had one here too, I mean, do you have any thoughts about what we're saying?
I think it might be a little clumsy to combine the two into one because they're sort of going different directions. Because it's gonna get wordy, in terms of if it's one consolidated document. I agree, we kind of have a shared existence, but I think you're gonna get wordy. You may get a bit too wordy if you make them into one, but fine, if you can do it, fine, but I just think it could get a bit wordy because the
just
things of
shorten
how you're dealing with a 5-person board versus one individual and then going,
Okay.
but whatever.
Clean up both instead,
Yeah,
maybe.
whatever works, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
And then you also had the internet and the social media.
That was not, I don't know why
That came
that's
from
here.
the town. We in working with HR and so forth about having a, same thing. You see now towns have defined
Oh, so
internet.
these are proposed, or are these?
Yeah, no, these are proposed. These do
Oh,
not
okay,
exist.
I did
The
not
town
realize
did do
it.
something on the social media or the internet, because they had employees sign something saying they were aware of the policy,
Right,
right?
Yeah.
Like, believe it or not, got a call from some town employee saying, why am I asked to sign this?
right.
I said, I don't know anything about it, but I
Right.
see it, and I read it, and
So have these been like through legal and HR review and everything,
Yeah,
Paul?
these were submitted by HR. When the word came out that in the office that the board was gonna look at goals and the code of conduct, then he said, well, can we throw on the internet and social media policy on there? And if you recall, George, there was a social media policy for the board.
Yeah, there is one, yeah.
Back, that came in, when, at a
Yeah,
concern.
Jim
Oh,
Lane.
yeah, so
Yeah.
that, it's in section 416.
Right,
There's
yeah,
a
I was
social media
looking at that
piece
too, yeah.
That's not nearly as
As
detailed as this.
detailed as this,
so
right. And
we
I
just
think
wanna
the
make
same
sure
thing, I
there's
think
no-
they get this from other towns, sort of like the code of conduct.
I
It's
don't,
geez.
like, with these, I don't have a problem with the level of detail, because I think they're more policy
Mm-hmm.
than code of conduct.
Yeah, and they apply to all the employees, it's not just the,
but these were already, my understanding, these were already done at the HR level.
Right. And that's what we're saying, these are the revised documents at HR to bring them to the board.
Right.
Well, and like on the Internet Code of Conduct, Paul, the personnel document
Mm-hmm.
that I have, like section 810, also has an Internet Code of Conduct. So like, would this replace that, or?
I think it would supplement
It
it.
would supplement it? And then the only other question I had was, do these two documents apply just to paid town employees, or are these things that you would envision elected and/or appointed
well, the social media,
committees to also sign off on?
the social media says, board committee,
Was- yeah.
members elected and appointed, very first sentence.
Okay.
So, and that was kind of a surprise to me, that-
So would internet
I don't-
apply to anybody who has a town account?
Right. Because if they're acting in the behalf of the town of Chelmsford email, what they do in their private email, in their private time is theirs, but if they're
Right.
they're acting through the town, then,
So like, we would be asked to sign off on this too,
Right.
then?
yeah.
Yeah. I thought these were really well done. I like them.
Yeah, I was good with those two. I didn't really have much commentary on the internet and social media ones. With my understanding, those were already done.
Yeah.
Town employees are aware of them. That was done.
There was, on page 6 of the social media, at the top, it just looks like there was a sentence or couple of
I noticed that
sentences that
too.
got garbled. The thing that starts, "To the extent their policies are inconsistent."
Yeah, and then the next one starts, scheduled, comma, the town, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they're complete sentences.
Yeah, it looks
right
like maybe
there.
somebody cut something off, cut and pasted and
Right.
didn't
Yeah.
paste appropriately.
But I thought they looked good. I liked them.
So we good?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm good. A motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Don't have to do a roll call today.
No? Aye?
Are you doing a roll call?
No, but all in favor?
I said aye.
Aye.
I didn't say anything yet. Thanks for your time, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.